the little black kid bouncing off the effing walls on the floor. There's nothing you can do.
And what participants believe was a private conversation, racism, colorism, homophobia, and bigotry were exposed like never before. The effort to undermine the political influence of black fellow citizens was specifically targeted by these so-called leaders. Everyday people stormed the doors of City Hall demanding immediate resignations. Even the President of the United States called for resignations. On Thursday, October 12th, 5 to 7 p.m., KBLA Talk 1580 will host a day of dialogue on the anatomy of anti-black racism and bigotry in Los Angeles with an all-star panel of civic leaders. Don't miss this conversation. Thursday, October 12th, live from 5 to 7 p.m. with an encore performance from 7 to 9 p.m. only on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again, y'all. Look out. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me. I despise. 'Cause it means destruction of innocent lives. War means tears to thousands of mothers die when their sons go off to fight and lose their lives. I said war. Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely. Get said again.
KBLA. What is it good for? We're being joined right now by former president of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. That's an important organization of African American, African, and Afro-Caribbean political scientists. He served as the chair of the Department of Politics of the University of San Francisco and faculty coordinator for African American Studies, a well-known scholar and a professor at the University of San Francisco. James Lance Taylor, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me back, Dominique.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Dr. Taylor, it's always tough whenever we get into conversations about what's going on in Israel, what's going on with the Palestinians, the Middle East in general is such a complex and fraught topic. A lot of folks don't even want to talk about it at all. So I appreciate you giving us some historical context and being willing to even have the conversation.
Sure.
So let's do a little ABCs. I'm not saying I know everything. In fact, I think I've forgotten more than I remember about Israel and Palestine. But let's go all the way back, not to the beginning of time, but back to the founding of Israel. You're talking about,
right, 1948,
clear,
yeah,
Jewish,
1948.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say 1947, 1948, the British established the Bellflower Doctrine and basically established the state of Israel with, some of the money from the Rothschilds and others. There was a man named Theodore Herzl, H-E-R-Z-E-L. H-E-R-Z-L. And Theodore Herzl was a playwright in the 1880s in Austria. And he was, advocating for a Jewish state. He wrote a piece called Das Judenstaat. And Das Judenstaat was his play that was a propaganda piece around the idea of a Jewish state, because in the 1880s in Austria, there was a backlash of white liberals against Jews. So it'd be like here in America if all the white liberals turned against Jews in America. That happened in the 1880s in Austria. And it so caused a culture shock to the Jews because they had sold out and assimilated so much that they ceased to embrace any kind of Jewish identity, except in the court where they were relegated to the courts where the women were, they would call these court Jews, C-O-U-R-T Jews, court Jews, who were the women who were segregated away from participating with, the WASP or other European women. And so in that isolation, those Jewish women became financiers and lenders to the other women that weren't Jewish, and it became a phenomenon by itself. But there was really a backlash on jewelry as a result of the XYZ affair in World War I with Captain Louis Dreyfus. It's called the Dreyfus Affair. The Dreyfus Affair caused a massive backlash in Europe, and it so caused a culture shock for Jews that even though they had completely sold out, they were not Jewish conscious. And in fact, Theodore Herzl was such a sellout that he tried to be white, and until his white friends told him he wasn't white, he went into a tailspin. Then he writes the play. Then he advocates for it. Then eventually, and in the meantime, just be clear, W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey, who were political rivals or ideological rivals, they both supported the idea of the state of Israel, Garvey and Du Bois, but it wasn't necessarily in Palestine. It was going to be Uganda. Uganda was the Holy Land initially, and then it ended up being where it is in Palestine in 47, and then there was the 67 war, and then the 73 war, and then more recent developments. And when you say layered and complex, I don't think it's that complicated. Somebody came and took somebody's land with a claim that God gave it to them. I don't know how is that complicated, because the people that were there, the indigenous people, they believed in God too. And the question is, who's God? And they all believe in the same God. Abraham has three lines: the Christian line, the Jewish line, and the Muslim line. They all claim Abraham as their father. They're all the Abrahamic traditions. And so all of that, why can't Abraham's children get along? And people say it's not about religion, it's about land. I think it's about all of this stuff. And I'm old enough now to have seen this conflict my whole life. I can quote Marvin Gaye and Curtis Mayfield songs that talk about war in the Middle East. We got money for war and can't feed the poor. This has been ongoing. And part of it is because the evangelical Christians in America embrace it, that they believe that based on the 2 Thessalonians chapter 4 in the Bible, in the rapture, so they believe that the world has to, certain events have to line up in a perfect storm in order for the second coming of Christ. And this is the misery of the teaching of a religion that requires destruction on earth, tribulation on earth, suffering on earth, before the Lord can come back. That's kind of twisted.
Well, Dr. Taylor, what you just laid out is exactly why I say it is complicated, because
Right.
You've got this religious component, you've got the money component, the spiritual piece, the land, and international politics, all with different agendas competing in this tiny place, which has historical implications depending on your religious beliefs. And so for the average person that's not an expert political scientist, it's like, really? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys?
Yeah. No,
and
great point.
Let's just believe what we hear in the paper, in the mainstream press.
Yeah, the mainstream press is absolutely biased in the Israeli direction, and I don't think that's even controversial. Even when you look at the numbers, I think there've been 300 Israelis killed since 1997. There have been 6,000 Palestinians killed since 1997.
Well, of course, you're not counting the Hamas attack recently, because there
right. Well, exactly,
more than
and that's why you see such a fierce reaction, is because the numbers have radically changed from 300 to about 1,000 or more Israelis, and that's going back 30 years. So this is the first time such a devastating attack has had the numerical impact, and that's devastating. And I think Hamas may have did a game theory and assumed that Israel would overreact, and Israel's overreaction would make Israel look bad. A bully doesn't look good even if he's getting revenge, and Israel looks really bad right now in the world. Whatever, it's like 9/11. All the sentiment that the world had poured out for the United States on 9/11 went away when George Bush decided to go to Iraq. And I'm saying that with Netanyahu, Bibi, and we have to remember how disrespectful he was when he came here. I'm no big Obama fan, but I don't want you coming from another country disrespecting the American president, especially a black one, the way he did when he came here and talked to Congress on Obama's watch, like Obama was some boy. But Bibi's a vicious racist. He, anti-Palestinian. He's talking about killing people and devastating them for generations. And this is a pretext. This incident created a pretext for the reaction you're seeing. The IDF, and I've had about 5 Israeli students in my teaching career who were IDF, Israeli Defense Force soldiers, and I know the mentality. I talk to them, and they don't play. They are like pit bulls about Israel, the young men and young women. But Jimmy Carter is somebody I think the evangelicals and Christians should be looking to instead of Donald Trump. And that's the tragedy of the white evangelical movement, is it almost has lost all credibility as a witness for Jesus Christ in America because their racism is more important to them than their faith. And,
okay,
and
well, let
Jimmy
me circle
Carter,
back. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say Jimmy Carter, has said that, it's an apartheid state, and that's powerful coming from Jimmy Carter because he has the moral credibility. And then he also called Gaza the largest open-air prison in the world where you got 2 million people, living in squalor, and 50% of these people are poor. And Israel has a whole system of teachings of social justice. I mean, the Jewish and Talmudic teachings about social justice are some of the highest values conveyed, but somehow they don't apply to the Palestinians.
I was going to circle back to you saying Israel looks bad on the world stage. I also think Hamas looks horrible on the world stage. I don't know about that theory that you're talking about, but killing civilians is not a good look ever, anywhere, by any military
Right.
or insurgent organization.
Right.
Period. Full
Right.
stop.
Absolutely. But what you're saying is, though, Hamas did its dirt. It's done its deed, and now it's sort of pulled Israel into reacting more intensely. So we're watching. We didn't even. You might have seen the beginning of the original attack on television, but it wasn't like clear as say a 9/11 attack. It was sort of like, okay, something happened over here. A lot of people have been taken. There's all these different scenes over here in Israel where all of this uprising has happened, or this incident has happened, and then Israel reacts, and they're devastating, all of the area, just randomly bombing civilians as well. And it just looks worse for Israel because my point is we barely got a chance. We barely saw what Hamas did in terms of the visual compared to what we're now seeing. We're watching every day Israel from the morning to evening, bombing. And what I'm trying to say is, in terms of the even-handedness of it, the original attack has not been nearly as circulated in media. So we're not seeing the original attack as much as we're seeing the reaction. And that just, again, in my perspective, the United States had a great deal of world sentiment for it on 9/11, and it lost all of it when it went to war. And I'm saying with Bibi going for Hamas indiscriminately, blowing up communities, blowing up buildings, that is a bad look for Israel, and eventually it's going to backfire in terms of international sentiment. Again, because what Hamas has done is brought more attention to their condition where, they've had, Israel, for example, the government hadn't even met with Hamas in about 4 years to even talk to them and give them some respect. Now, the PLO is not friendly with Hamas. So the PLO has some
Palestinian
control.
Liberation Organization.
Right. So, I think, and from a black perspective and a black politics perspective, going back to the 1972 the National Black Political Convention, where your father was the main, personality there, the main organizer and leader and agenda setter, that's where the Palestinian issue was first raised for black politics, and everyone at Gary took a pro-Palestinian position against Israel, and I think what people want to distinguish is because there's always the insinuation of anti-Semitism. I heard Julius Malema of South Africa explain very deliberately that we should be clear that the state of Israel's actions are condemnable, but we cannot confuse that with anti-Semitism. He says we have no problem with the Jewish people, and we shouldn't. But we should be able to critique foreign policy of the state of Israel the same way we should be able to critique South Africa and call it an apartheid state without you being called a racist. But recently, a European leader said, if you call Israel an apartheid state, it's anti-Semitic. Well, that's racist or something, where you're basically bullying me from telling you how what you're doing to me is impacting me, and then you're deciding how I should respond, and you're dictating my response. So I think when you look at black politics, like I said, Du Bois supported Israel, Garvey supported Israel. The black men liberated Dachau. Black men liberated parts of Auschwitz in the Holocaust, in the Shoah. But black politics has always, for the last 50 to 60 years, the mainstream of black politics, I'm not talking about in the Democratic Party, but I'm talking about in outside of the Democratic Party, has been very pro Palestine, because I think the underdog position of the Palestinians in that condition is relatable to black Americans who have similarly been colonized, because black America is colonized and doesn't recognize it, but Palestinians know clearly their dilemma, and
yeah.
what.
Talking with Dr. James Lance Taylor, and I do want to circle back a little bit here to how we got to where we are and how we get out of this place. What is the solution? What is the way forward? We're talking with Dr. James Lance Taylor. You're invited into the conversation. If you have commentary, if you've got a question or an opinion, of course, you know what to do. 800-920-1580. We are KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
A sense of peace, a place to kick back and put down roots, a lasting legacy. However you define home, at City National, we're committed to helping you get there with our City National Ladder Up Home Loan Program. Find the full benefits at cnb.com/ladderuphome. City National Bank, here for our clients and communities. Ladder Up program is available only in select areas. Terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. City National Bank is an equal housing lender. Member FDIC. NMLS ID 536994.
Hustle up. We've got 8 more floors to go before lunch.
Sarusha's window washing business is reaching new heights.
Wipe, and let's roll.
They need more certified cleaners to keep online reviews crystal clear.
Team, I know we're hustling, but watch for streaks. Candace, can you give me a hand over here?
Indeed can help them hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Our hiring platform instantly connects you with quality candidates, and you can schedule and conduct virtual interviews right from the Indeed dashboard. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
King C. Gillette knows you're dedicated to your barbershop routine. But what about after? What's your routine for facial hair to avoid dry skin, itching, and beard rough? Well, the King C. Gillette Beard Oil is a perfect fit for making your beard feel as good as it looks. It softens your facial hair and moisturizes to help prevent itch due to dry skin. Get facial hair that feels as good as it looks. Just trim, wash, and soften. With King C. Gillette. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice, and injustice. The courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Ariva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Ariva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
And we do thank you. We thank you, Dr. James Lance Taylor, is a political scientist and a professor at the University of San Francisco, diving into this topic, history there of Israel, Palestine. It really comes down to, correct me if I'm wrong, European powers trying to carve up the Middle East according to their plans, their desires, and Israeli people needing a home or establishing a home. But as you say, it's not that complicated because it's people taking other people's land. Many nations, including the United States, are founded on other people's land. You fight a war, you win, and then to the victor goes the spoils, right?
No, not really. You can look at Australia, and the black Aborigine were there for 60,000 years before the whites showed up in 1787 and made a claim to it. They were there for 60,000 years, and they have been trading peacefully with the Indonesians who were north of them in Australia for thousands of years with no rape, no war, no violence, complete peace. The same thing was true of the Ohlone here in the Bay Area for 3,000 years. From the time of the Roman Empire to the American Revolution is 3,000 years. In both Australia and in California, the indigenous people were living at peace with other people for thousands of years until the white man came in the same year, 1776, 1787, and destroyed it. So there are examples like, Adam Smith wrote the book, The Wealth of the Nations, and talked about the invisible hand of the marketplace, but that invisible hand was always white. The reality is that there are examples of countries that did evolve and mature and develop without violence, without murder, without rape, and without pillage. The Western man, the rebel of the earth, whose skin has been around for 8,000 years, according to Harvard University studies on color and complexion, is the rebel of the earth. And that's why we have so many records of, the Vikings and the Normans, taking over with violence, but you don't have that, outside of the Doheny in in Africa, you don't have this pattern of, and you had the Comanche here in the United States where they were they were the wildest, they were the most violent Native Americans, and the Doheny in Africa, you had a similar kind of dynamic. But apart from those,
what about the Asante?
I'm not that deep. That's a good question. I'm not that deep on it. But, whatever,
right.
Whatever the point is, I guess I'm trying to suggest is there are examples in history where people evolved into development differently than the way the European did. The European did it at the expense of everybody else. And to this day, the white West will not concede its crimes against humanity. Racism is about 500 years old. Racism has not always been here, and racism is not permanent. But the white man of the West has got to renounce racism. It's not our problem. It's theirs. And the game that they play with Israel is a similar kind of game they play with model minorities here in the United States and use them against other people around them as pawns for their own political purposes. The British created Israel, and the British got the hell out of Israel within 2 to 3 years, and they've had nothing to do with it ever since. But the British created this problem. With the Balfour document, it was one of the first things I learned at USC when I went to graduate school. I took a class on Middle Eastern politics. So even though I'm not an expert on the Middle East, that was the first class I took at USC was Middle East and North African politics, and it broke down the Balfour Declaration, the establishment of Israel, and the Palestinian response, and then the Black American response, which is where I'm most comfortable talking about this, is from this perspective of how black people in the United States and Africa, Malema and others, again, they are clear that they have a problem with Israel's apartheid arrangement, but they don't have a problem with the Jewish people as a people. And again, in American politics, people are quick to call something anti-Semitic. What's really deep about anti-Semitism is, again, you have someone like Kanye West trying to explain with his own faith and Kyrie Irving that we black people, there's a tradition amongst black people that believes that they are the original Hebrew Israelites, right? I'm not even talking about the brothers in the organization with the purple and gold. I'm talking about people who, I have a student who is a black American woman. I saw her 2 days ago. She came to an event. She is a observant Jew, and she is struggling to lead the bridge between black and Jewish American relations because she says there's a great deal of racism and anti-blackness in the Jewish community in the United States. See, we have that conversation like around Farrakhan. It's a one-way direction. How blacks are anti-Jewish. James Baldwin said blacks are not anti-Semitic. James Baldwin said blacks are anti-white, and Jewish people in Harlem at that time were perceived as white. But Adolf Reed,
right? But we also have a tradition of coalition and mutual support in terms of the oppression of our communities as well.
Absolutely. Wonderful, too. Adolph Reed says there's no history of anti-Semitism amongst Black America. But Dr. Jones, Clarence Jones, who was the attorney of Martin Luther King, who's still alive, he talked about how important that relationship was for the movement. American Jews, many of them descendants of Russian Jews, who survived the Holocaust, had a real sensitivity toward a active government protecting people. So the thing that Jews and Blacks share in common politically is that they both believe in a strong federal government to protect them as minorities from a tyrannical, say, majority in society. So if everybody turned on Jews like they did in Austria in the 1800s, that's why they support a strong federal government. But the New Deal coalition, the Great Society, and Civil Rights Movement coalition, that 30-year cycle, kind of started breaking up with Reagan. And Reagan began to pluck Jews away from the Democratic coalition and Irish individuals. And so, that New Deal Democrat Great Society coalition is now fragile. And Jews and Blacks are still the strongest Democrats in America. They are. When you hear the word liberal in America is code for Black and Jewish around policy questions and issues, and it always has been. Like I said, I agree with you completely. There's a strong tradition of, radical individuals, especially in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, even going back to the 20s in this country, who have fought side by side with Black intellectuals, Black social movement organizations, Black churches, and we do need to give credit where credit is due. But I think, like with every other group in this country, like the Chinese, who are opposing us on affirmative action everywhere, and the Japanese, who we've supported since internment, sometimes people forget those relationships. And I think because time has moved on, the Chinese community, for example, is opposing affirmative action, but they forgot that the first Chinese community ever born in California and in America was born in Negro Valley in Los Angeles. There was a place called
We got to hold that thought. We got news, traffic, and sports here. Hard stop. I want to continue that conversation because I know that there are Japanese Americans, most of them supporting our reparations, and there are plenty of Chinese American students that are opposing that anti-affirmative action drive by others in their community. Talking with Dr. James Lance Taylor, continuing the conversation when we come forward, only on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Israel says there will be no end to its airstrikes on the Gaza Strip until Hamas frees all of its hostages. Today's statement comes after the Red Cross called for fuel to be allowed into Gaza to prevent hospitals from, in their words, turning into morgues. Israel has vowed to annihilate Hamas following Saturday's attack that saw hundreds of militants storming the border and taking hostages. The Missouri Supreme Court has agreed to hear a discrimination case involving workers at a now closed Harley-Davidson plant in North Kansas City. The lawsuit was filed 8 days before the plant closed 4 years ago and alleges that mostly Black workers who were employed by a contractor were treated unfairly by people who worked directly for Harley-Davidson. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Wendy's new pumpkin spice frosty is peak fall. It'll make any kind of fall fun even fallier. So no matter how you fall, grab a rich, creamy pumpkin spice frosty from Wendy's today. Limited time only at participating U.S. Wendy's. Vanilla frosty is temporarily unavailable.
Escape with the best stories of the year on Audible. Hear celebrity memoirs, mysteries, true crime, sci-fi, and more. Ignite your imagination with audiobooks, podcasts, and originals. Sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
It happened again. For the second straight year, the Dodgers win 100 games in the regular season, then get eliminated in their first playoff series. The Dodgers lose by 2 last night and got swept by the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Dodgers were also on the wrong end of history. Lance Lynn gave up 4 home runs in the third inning, the first time a team had that many homers in one inning in a playoff game. Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, the Dodgers' best hitters, were combined 1 for 21 in the series. Mookie was 0 for 11. The Pac-12 Conference had media day for the upcoming men's basketball season. Arizona, USC, and UCLA were picked to finish 1, 2, and 3 in the conference. Still no word yet on when USC freshman Bronny James will be cleared to start practicing with the team. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California and around the country to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. As part of JP Morgan Chase commitment, they are taking action to help improve financial wealth and access to banking in the Black community, helping more people open low-cost checking and savings accounts, hosting community seminars with supporting Black-led institutions by building awareness about financial investments, hiring community managers, and opening community center branches like Crenshaw, Inglewood, and downtown LA. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Get the tools to help reach your financial goals. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity.
The City of Los Angeles Civil Rights Department and its Reparations Advisory Commission are calling on you to be a part of something powerful. Join the Black Experience Study to share your experiences with the City of Los Angeles. We want to hear your stories. To join the study, join a focus group, or schedule an interview with us, visit www.blackexperiencela.com by December 31st. For more information, call 213-978-1845 or visit www.laisforeveryone.com.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. 120,000 miles of night drives, daily commutes, and who knows how many.
Are we there yet?
Through countless fixes, elbow grease, and a new radiator, you kept your ride alive. With eBay Motors, you have over 122 million parts to keep it running. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, they'll be the perfect fit every time. Plus, at these prices, well, we're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
If you're like me, hair isn't just hair, because hair is confidence. Hair is identity. Hair is everything. And I love that I can find beauty steals of 50% off my hair care must-haves like Lola V and Color Wow. Amazing deals on shampoo and conditioner pairs from Redken and Living Proof. And new product launches from my favorite brands like Dyson and Way. All at Ulta Beauty's gorgeous hair event. Happening now until October 21st. So hurry! Shop in store, online, or try pickup today. Ulta Beauty. The possibilities are beautiful. Conditions may apply.
We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
And Dr. James Lance Taylor is our guest. We're talking about Israel and the Palestinian people right now, really a conflict between the Israeli government and the organization Hamas, which is a political organization. So I do think as a political scientist, you could kind of put that in context as people think Hamas equals Palestinians and Netanyahu and the current government in Israel equals Israeli people, and that's not really true.
And again, I think it's, separating the state from the society, or separating the state from the people, or separating the state from the nation. The people are the nation, the state is the state. And of course, many times the people oppose the state's actions but don't know how to go about curtailing the state when it's got an agenda. And England created this mess, and we've been trying since 1974 to come up with a two-state solution. After the 1967 war, the Palestinians lost a great deal of territory, and the big conflict right now has been unresolved in initiative after initiative for 50-plus years. Since 1974, almost 50-plus years since 1974, there's been this, proposal for a two-state solution that would set boundaries based on 67 before before 67 or after 67. The Jewish community government wants to keep everything after 67 because they expanded, and the Palestinian organizations want to go back to the pre-1967 territories, and that's been a hot point of disagreement. But even after this initial effort, there have been efforts all the way up until the last 5 years to come up with a two-state solution. That's what we most simple-minded people like me think you just create two governments, right? Two states, put them side by side. Israel's going to want to have a military. Israel's not going to want Palestine to have a military, right? In other words, there is a solution, and we've always had it, but it's never been carried out, and that is the more complicated aspect, I think, of this whole dilemma, is how to bring modern Israel and Palestine into the 21st century, and in terms of peace. In the past there has been peace between the people in the society, but again, it's those elites and state actors that tend to direct events and affairs to the point where we're in a constant state of disruption. You can go back to the 1970s. I remember when I was a kid, I was watching TV, and I remember we had the images of the Ethiopians that were constantly belly swelling from the famine in Ethiopia in the 70s. And what was the solution? The state of Israel did a major airlift under Menachem Begin, and brought all of those Jewish people over to Israel. And Menachem Begin, I never will forget, because it's the first time I ever heard it, Menachem Begin said on TV, these are the original Jewish people. He was talking about the Falasha, the Ethiopians, and they were listing them to Israel, and many of them still live in Israel. And so I think we also, Dominique, and this is where you probably could use my student, who's a black Jewish young woman, to help us parse the difference between, Judaism as faith and Judaism as a deep culture, but also how does it relate to not just being a white or European religious practice. In Uganda, you have serious, Jewish traditions amongst Africans that go back thousands of years, and so there are those in Uganda who make original claims to Judaism, and of course, with TikTok and the internet, everybody's claiming America is now Africa and America is now Egypt, and we were already here, and it was, we were not here. We were brought here with slaves, and Tariq Nasheed is going to tell us something else. So
yeah, don't get me started on that. But actually, since you brought it up, there are people like him on Twitter that say, "F the Palestinians. We need to worry about black people in America," and that is, as you pointed out earlier, counter to what the progressive or radical black community has typically done.
Right. Yeah. That brother, this all came out of the affirmative action debates in the Ivy League schools when the affirmative action was distributed mainly to Africans and West Indians. And then those of us, and I am on the San Francisco Reparations Committee, and I wrote a piece of legislation with a group of other people back in 2006 in San Francisco called the Slavery Disclosure Ordinance. So we've been preparing ourselves for reparations when the rest of the world finally caught up with us. And yet, someone like, Tariq comes along when he saw what happened at Harvard and Yale with affirmative action. When they started talking about reparations, black folks jumped in front, black Americans jumped in front and said, no, this can't happen again. You can't do with reparations what you did with affirmative action. So they started talking about, American descendants of slaves and foundational black Americans, et cetera, right? And there is a tendency to say, let them worry about their problem and let us worry about ours. Mark Lamont Hill is famous for taking a pro-Palestinian position. I mean, it cost him a job at CNN. We remember the big blow-up with Mark Lamont Hill. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a narrow-minded nationalist, but I did ask myself, why does Mark Lamont Hill spend so much political capital on the idea of the condition of the Palestinians, and it doesn't have a whole lot of material reality connected to the material conditions of black people, for example, in Baltimore? So the idea that there's this general theory of progressive thought that they always have to be on the same side, on a left position on Palestine, a left position on something on immigration, on something similar. It just, I think it undermines the Palestinian support here because, again, black folks say, we got our own crises, and where are the Palestinians when we have our crises, right? When Black Lives Matter, I'm sure, because I heard
I actually
that
have seen Palestinians marching in Black Lives Matter marches, a lot of them actually.
Right. So, and so those kind of exchanges or that kind of reciprocity, I think, is something that has to be developed. But as is, there is a mindset amongst Black Americans that, we have our own priorities. We should focus on our priorities. But I think it's also, like you said, because everything is so layered and complex, and it goes back over 70 years of events and policies and failures, that it becomes very difficult to try to get by the ears.
To me, it reminds me a little bit of the United States in that you have these extremist conservative factions that make decisions that in a way hold the whole country hostage. I'm talking about the Freedom Caucus here. In Israel, I'm talking about these aggressive settlers that continue to make incursions into the ever shrinking territory that is Palestinian land. And I can't really get my mind around that other than comparing it to like the Freedom Caucus, because they've been condemned internationally as illegal, and the Palestinian territory continues to shrink. And yet you have these Israeli folks that are still living right now in Gaza and continuing to push the line. And so I feel like it's important to understand that. Speak to me about that in terms of the range of political thought within Israel.
Yeah, and I think that's something that has been ongoing. It's just the ongoing encroachment of the settlements and the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, continue to push further and further into Gaza as the main site, and it, I think this thing is coming to a head. I think Hamas has calculated. I think they did some game modeling and has calculated potential outcomes. If they do this, then the Israelis will do this, and the Americans will do this, and the West will do this, and Putin will do this, and Iran will do this. And so this is all game theory. I think, people sat around modeling outcomes. They aren't weighing the Black American response, but let's be clear. Netanyahu, I just saw, I don't know how old it was, so I don't want to be putting out bad information, but I saw a picture of Netanyahu with the Congressional Black Caucus. I don't know how old that was, but the headline was, Netanyahu meets with Congressional Black Caucus or courts Congressional Black Caucus. For some reason, he wanted to talk to the Congressional Black Caucus because he knows we tend to be very critical. We have voices, we have platforms, and we will use them. And I think he wanted to preempt the Black response by meeting with the CBC so that they wouldn't come out swinging against the actions against Palestine. Because, again, they know the Black American position by default in the United States, going back to the 1972 Gary Convention, has been a pro-Palestinian position. And, again, that puts Black politics at variance with the mainstream of American media and journalism in terms of how they're covering and reporting this. But if we were in France right now, or if we were in Australia or Spain, they are not reporting the what's happening in the region in the same way the West does, because many times those people don't have a dog in the fight, but the United States has had a dog in the fight and only likes one of the dogs the whole time. And so what we're hearing, if you flew to Canada today, you would hear very different reporting about what's happening. And so I think, part of what you have to be able to discern when you're listening to American media is, in my classes, I'll show, for example, when there's war, how the, major outlets continuously bring in generals and military authorities and anti-terrorism so-called experts. I don't know what an anti-terrorism expert is, but they made that up, And so, you have this cycling of these individuals with the same messaging. And so eventually you're sitting there for 3 hours and they keep saying the Palestinians are this, the Palestinians are that. And then you won't even think about proportionality. Okay, let's talk about proportionality. Okay, the Palestinians did the Hamas, let me correct myself. Hamas did something terrible and unforgivable, right? Now for Israel to act out in the same way, how does Israel come out on top in terms of the moral element? Israel, as much as it was a victim of this horror, its violence in response I think, undermine sympathy for it, and then it becomes like a mean machine, just bullying a people that are already on the bottom. And Hamas has calculated, I think, that it's going to bring more attention to the condition of the Palestinians. That's what it's done. Now we're talking about the poverty in the region.
At a huge
we're
cost.
talking about open air prisons.
Yeah.
So I think
at a huge cost to both the Palestinian people and Israeli people, though. I mean, that calculation. And I did get my Google fingers going for you, Dr. Taylor. And the picture that you're talking about is from September. So it was last month. 10 members of the Congressional Black Caucus meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he tried to improve relations with Black Democrats. It's an interesting observation. Time flies when you're on the radio. We're talking with Dr. James Lance Taylor, and maybe we've raised more questions than we've answered, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're going to have to do some more deep thinking here. When we come forward, I want to get your thoughts from the political science perspective. What does the escalation of this war look like, and how can it be shut down? Why aren't more Western powers calling for de-escalation? Will we see this war spreading throughout the region and throughout the globe, possibly? How can we sustain these two massive wars at the same time? And how do we, for those of us who are peaceniks like me, find the way forward, encourage the way forward towards peaceful solutions? It's KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
We're celebrating 1 year of the K. From checking out the vibrant art and diverse dining in Leimert Park to cheering on your favorite team in Inglewood, you can choose your own adventure when you ride the Metro K-Line. Leave the car at home and go Metro. Visit metro.net/K-Line.
I walk for my mom, who survived a heart attack.
I walk to inspire my kids.
I walk to save lives. So can you. Join the American Heart Association's Greater Los Angeles Heart and Stroke Walk, October 22nd. Register at heartwalkla.org.
Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Ugh, I don't have time for a cold.
Honey.
Honey?
You need DayQuil Severe Honey flavor.
DayQuil Severe Honey gives you powerful cold and flu symptom relief with a honey-licious taste. Because life doesn't stop for a cold.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
Now I'm getting a cold.
Honey.
Try DayQuil Severe Honey for powerful cold and flu relief. DayQuil Severe Honey flavor. The daytime coughing, aching, stuffy head, fever, honey-licious. Power through your day, medicine. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
The Green Foundation, key health influencer, empowering our Black communities through action. The Green Foundation advocates for affordable health care, accessibility, and knows the importance of culturally relatable health care. Regardless of income, we believe it is a right for optimum health. The Green Foundation has been at the forefront for 25 years, dedicated solely to promoting prevention through early detection, annual screenings, and nutrition. We know you because we are you. Our hand-holding approach supports you and your family to receive your right to be treated fairly and receiving quality healthcare services. We want you and your family to know COVID-19 was devastating to our families and to our wallet. We can build back better by understanding prevention, wearing your mask, washing your hands, social distancing, and understanding the impact of long COVID. Get the care you deserve. Take advantage of your privileges. Contact us, info@thegreenfoundation.net. info@thegreenfoundation.net.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where everybody is somebody and nobody is a stranger. You belong here.
Dr. James Lance Taylor, our guest, been talking about the situation in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas going out at the Israeli government and Hamas going at it while the people of both nations suffer. What do you think is happening right now in terms of expansion? Everyone's expecting a ground invasion from Israel into the Gaza Strip. How dangerous is the spread of this particular situation?
Yeah, that's really dangerous because, again, we're talking about, boots on the ground in the neighborhoods of these people who have basically been isolated in the society and cordoned off, from other parts of their own, people by the way the boundaries and borders have been set going back since the 1940s. Again, the idea of a two-state solution is about 90 years old, and we still are, going back to 1937, even before the settling of Israel, there was some, United Nations activity going on around the possibility. When after the Shoah, the Shoah is what the Holocaust is called. That pretty much underwrote everything else that would come. What happened to the Jewish people for 11 months in between 45 and 44. 6 million people were killed in 11 months. I mean, that's what people don't realize about what happened in Europe in World War II, in Poland, and in Poland mainly, is that you had 6 million people killed in 11 months. Now, Rwanda was more intense in 94 for 90 days. More killing happened in Rwanda, but nevertheless, that was ethnic cleansing and genocide that we saw in World War II. And the Jewish people have a mindset that this can never happen to them again, right? They went from chosenness. They went from chosenness to the Shoah. And I asked one of my students about this reality, and she said that even through the Shoah, we held on to our original faith, and it was the darkest moment in Jewish history was Auschwitz and Dachau and Buchenwald. I remember a black man named Timuel Black, who was a great teacher in Chicago. He died recently, over 100 years old. Timuel Black. He was he's so phenomenal. I'll get distracted talking about him, but he told me the story of when he helped as a soldier in World War II liberate Dachau. He said when he walked up and they saw what the Germans had done to the Jews, this black man said he wanted to kill everything German in his sight because they were emaciated and devastated. And these people who were survived in Dachau, they saw these black men as angels. That's what he said. They thought they were black angels coming from heaven to rescue them. And that's how they understood the liberation of these black men. So there's a strong connection between black people in America and the Jewish history, the Jewish people. And again, I'm not thinking just of white Judaism, but I'm thinking of, the whole tradition. And what we're dealing with now is the confusion of most Americans not having good information, a lot of misinformation from mass media. There's a lot of propaganda, a one-sidedness in what is reported. So people have to seek out their own information and try to, vet sources that give them basic information about the facts. You can go online, you can Google the wiki page of for example, the two-state solution, or something like the Balfour Declaration that started it all. You can educate yourself in the 21st century around these issues without propaganda, but it still comes back to politics, and that's where the average American doesn't have a lot of influence over the United States policies in foreign policy or in the region. So what we think as people, even if you Pew Research or someone else, CNN or someone, polls a bunch of people and we are for or against, the government doesn't really care about that because they have their own agenda, and the state begins to behave as a thing in and of itself with other states that are behaving like things. And I was thinking about that to myself today. The state as a creature and how the state is acting independent of the democracy within it. And now we're seeing all of this alignment that you were asking about earlier. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen with Russia and Iran? Because they're threatening Iran. They're trying to tie Iran to this. And Iran said to America and Israel, we dare you, and then Russia is behind Iran. Then China is with Russia, and then North Korea is with China. So I'm not a paranoid person. I don't go around any kind of conspiracy theory. But Donald Trump, recklessly continues to use the language publicly of World War III. It's irresponsible for Trump to do that because no president or no statesman or person would ever do such a thing, but he doesn't have all of his faculties connected. So he's saying World War III openly, which traumatizes
First he said
all
World
of us,
War
right?
II. Then he said World War III.
Thank you. Right, he said World War II. But think about the trauma that's put in your, and the stress and anxiety is put into your life, that nuclear war is coming, or drones are coming. And then you add the stress of the Ukraine war, how that affected you in the beginning, especially when you heard about how they treated the Africans and used them as fodder and wouldn't let the Africans out and, get out of Ukraine. And just sort of all of these things coming together, I'm suggesting the whole world is stressed out right now. COVID stressed us out. Now we're being stressed, and police violence across this country and the world stressed everybody out. Now we got you have the world at war, even though it's not World War III. And, for praying people and meditating people and people who believe that man is not in control of the destiny of humanity, they need to get on their knees or get their beads out, light your candles, call forth your ancestors, because the devil is busy. And if the devil is busy, the good people of this country and of the world need to be busy too. We can't sit back, as King would say, and watch the evil just roll out, and then the good folk, so-called, sit back and do nothing. So I think this is a rallying call for everybody in whatever area you can help. Right now, a lot of people are stressed out because, again, we're on the verge of some international conflagration that could be World War III. And if so, what does that imply for us? Like, how do you get out of that without some catastrophic incident happening that we'll never forget again, like Hiroshima, Nagasaki? Is there another Hiroshima, Nagasaki headed? And is it Chicago and Detroit this time? Are the Chinese going to hit us in Los Angeles and in San Francisco this time? But this is big history that's happening. And now they're claiming Putin is hurt or Putin is sick and Putin might be off the scene. So, there are people that believe that God is in control, whether you believe it or not. There are people that believe God is in control and that these actors, these human actors, they may have their own plans, but God has God's plan. And, to find God for you, I'm just saying there are people that believe deeply that even though they meant it for our bad, ultimately good will come out of it. But good will come out of it if people who are, watching, mobilize and organize around their commitments,
yes.
like youth, senior citizens.
That'll leave it there, Dr. James Lance Taylor. It's time to hand off to Tavis Smiley, but thank you so much for some courageous conversation. KBLA delegation, until tomorrow, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Israel says there will be no end to its airstrikes on the Gaza Strip until Hamas frees all of its hostages. Today's statement comes after the Red Cross called for fuel to be allowed into Gaza to prevent hospitals from, in their words, turning into morgues. Israel has vowed to annihilate Hamas following Saturday's attack that saw hundreds of militants storming the border and taking hostages. The Missouri Supreme Court has agreed to hear a discrimination case involving workers at a now closed Harley-Davidson plant in North